Okay, so I don't know whether to celebrate or cry. Interest rates are unchanged. Now, I am my father's son, so I watch interest rates like a hawk, and I want them lower. I'm sure you want them lower. I talk to people, and they're paying 7-8% for a house, and it makes me cry. Although I admittedly paid 7.25% at one point in time in my life. It was an ugly time. Joining me now, our favorite here on the show, John Carney, Breitbart News, finance and economics editor. Okay, John, rates are the same. What am I supposed to take from this?
That the Fed is worried that inflation is still running higher than they wanted it to. They were really convinced at the end of last year that inflation was going away. Remember, they cut interest rates 3 times in September, November, and December. But they really underestimated the strength of inflation. Inflation actually ran a lot hotter than they thought it would, and it showed some heat in the beginning of this year. It actually cooled off a little in February, but they're still worried about it, and so they're going to keep rates where they are, at least till June, probably later than that.
Okay, John, Trump seems to be, it's not that leaning on the Fed is a new thing for him, but Trump seems to be very, very keen on getting a rate cut before all this tariff stuff kicks in. I don't understand the connection. I'm 100% positive you do. What's the connection?
Yeah, so what Trump is saying is that he thinks that lower rates would ease the transition as we enter what might be a tariff fight. Look, Trump is saying he's going to put reciprocal tariffs, meaning we match what other countries put on us. And other countries may react to that by raising their own tariffs. A tariff war would not be good for the economy. There would be a slowdown if everybody is in sort of this race to the top with tariffs. I'm not sure that will happen. In fact, what we've seen with Canada and Mexico is we threaten tariffs. They actually agreed to comply with what we want. A rational country, let's say you're Germany, would say, okay, look, we will lower our tariffs, and so you'll lower yours. That's one response. But the Fed doesn't see it that way. The Fed actually, Jerome Powell said that they're calculating in the idea that there will be full reciprocation, full retaliation from other countries. So if we raise tariffs, they'll raise tariffs, which means we'll raise it. So the Fed is worried about what that means for growth. And they're also worried, on the other hand, that we could get higher inflation from tariffs. I think both of those might be wrong, but that's where the Fed is right now.
Okay, John, we're going to have a little tariff talk here because there are a couple things that I want you to clarify for me. When it comes to Mexico and Canada, we'll focus on them right now. What is going on with it? And I say it in this way. I know that's a terrible way to ask a question, but one day we wake up and there's going to be a tariff. And then the next day we wake up and they're backing off and there's no tariff. And then the next day there's going to be another tariff. And then the next day they're backing off. Is it going to be this for 4 years? What is the game being played here? Do we have them or do we not have them? When are we going to have them? What?
Yeah, I agree that this is not an ideal situation. You really want to be able to give businesses, consumers a steady hand, a guide to what is happening. This back and forth isn't helpful. But the thing to remember about the Canada and Mexico tariffs is they're really serving 2 functions. One, it's more of a diplomacy function than a trade function. The reciprocal tariffs that Trump is going to announce on April 2nd, those will be the real trade tariffs, the tariffs where we're reacting to other countries' unfair trade policies. This is what I'd call a diplomacy tariff, where Trump says, look, we have other problems that we need your help solving. Number 1, fentanyl. Number 2, illegal aliens crossing the border. We want you to help us out, Canada, Mexico. And if you agree to help us, the tariffs won't be the 25% that we said they would be. And if you try to fight back against a tariff hike instead of agreeing to help us, the tariffs will go even higher. So that's why we have this back and forth. I don't think that's a great way for, I do think there's an economic cost to the uncertainty that creates. And frankly, a psychological cost. As you said, they're on, they're off, they're on, they're off. That's not great. I do hope that we'll come to a resolution on those probably around April when the reciprocal tariffs are going on. What Trump is concerned about is that if we do get in this tariff war and it slows down the economy, that the Fed actually should be cutting. If the economy is slowing down, then there's a threat to employment. The Fed's mandate says cut. It also says they have to work about inflation, but if tariffs aren't very inflationary, the Fed should absolutely be cutting in this situation. That's why Trump is, I wouldn't say fighting with the Fed. Trump really believes that he is allowed to have opinions about monetary policy and he's allowed to express them. He's not like sicking Elon Musk on the Fed and saying, you must do what I tell you to do with interest rates. He's saying, I think you should cut. Go ahead, please do the right thing. But he's not saying, I hereby order you to cut, which, those are two different things. But the legacy media tends to obscure that.
John, my second part of the tariff question is, you mentioned if we raise our tariffs on somebody to match theirs, that they would raise theirs. So let's just make it about Germany, because that's a country you brought up. That doesn't make sense to me, because that sounds like a loser for Germany. I don't understand why a country that is smaller, weaker, and less financially sound than us would play that game with us. Why would they play that game?
It's a little bit like a game of cards. They want to check to see if we're bluffing. If we say we're going to impose tariffs on you at the same rate that you impose on us, one, I'll just say they say, well, that's not fair. We've been allowed to impose higher tariffs on you for 40 years. Why are you suddenly changing the deal? Donald Trump is saying that's what we're doing. We are changing the deal. The uneven playing field that we put in place, frankly, to win the Cold War, to make sure that our allies in Europe and Asia were more prosperous than the allies of the Soviet Union, we allowed them to have a better deal. Well, that's over now. They're fully developed countries. They have powerful economies on their own. They don't need the unlevel playing field anymore. Trump is saying we're going to get a level one. I would not be surprised if at least some of them try to say, we don't think you can do it. We think we're going to respond with higher tariffs on you, and we'll see who caves first. A game of chicken, I guess. But hopefully rational heads prevail over in Europe, because you shouldn't play that game with Donald Trump. Maybe you could get away with it with Joe Biden. You're not going to win it against Donald Trump.
Okay, and that brings me to what it means for me, you, everybody watching this show. Let's do a little worst case scenario here. Let's say it gets bad and they do jack up theirs and we jack up ours, and we have ourselves a good old fashioned trade war. We don't generally understand. I know you do, John, but idiots like me don't generally understand how that's going to impact me. What do we get from where? I don't understand. I'm reasonably sure we get some avocados from Mexico, but those are gross anyway, so nobody cares. How's this going to affect me?
So it actually will affect the U.S. a lot less than people think, because we import and export, frankly, far lower percentage of our economy than most other countries. We are a very large economy. We have a huge free market within the U.S. We are much less dependent on getting stuff from abroad. If you think about the difference between the environment of Maine and the environment of Hawaii and Alaska and Florida, we can grow oranges and we can catch salmon, right? Like very few other countries in the world have as much geographic diversity and therefore economic diversity as the US. So it'll impact us a lot less. The tariffs themselves are unlikely to cause very much inflation. Actually, the Fed's own projections released this week showed very little increase in inflation that they expect over the coming year from what they expected before Trump was elected. So they're not really that worried about inflation. I don't think people should be. A bigger threat may be if other countries raise their tariffs a lot, that could lower demand for some U.S. goods and services. That could then have a negative drag on the U.S. economy. But again, not as much as the headlines would have you believe, because we have a very large and independent economy, even if the rest of the world decides to throw a fit because Donald Trump is trying to make them play fair.
I cannot let you go without playing you this little clip from Elon Musk about magic money things. Here he was.
I call it magic money computer, any computer which can just make money out of thin air. That's magic money.
So how does that work?
It just issues payments.
And you said there's something like 11 of these computers at Treasury that are sending out trillions in payments?
They're mostly at Treasury. Some are, but there's some at HHS, some at, there's one or two at State, there's some at DOD. I think we found now 14 magic money computers.
14, okay.
They just send money out of nothing.
What?
Yeah, this is true. This is how the federal government makes payments. It doesn't, when you and I want to pay somebody something, we either reach into our wallet, our bank account, or our credit card. The federal government doesn't have to do any of those. It actually just sends out the checks and figures out whether it had enough money that it had borrowed or taxed later on. That's actually, officially, it's not really supposed to do it that way. The GEO says they're supposed to check to see if they have the funds. What Elon Musk is telling us, and I knew this going way back, is that they don't do that. They actually just send the checks out. They assume the money is there, that we've borrowed enough or we've taxed enough, and they just send it out. It is a magic money machine. We always talk about like the government printing money, but they don't really even print the money. I mean, yes, they print some dollars, but that's a small portion of the total money that's out there. They create money by literally telling a computer to increase other people's bank accounts. That's how the federal government creates money. They do this without looking first to see if they have the money. And it's one way of putting it is it's like the Fed has its own overdraft, or the federal government has its own overdraft facility. They just write the checks and then figure out if they can pay for it later. And if they can't, the check's still clear.
Jeez. What a world. John, thank you, brother. As always, I appreciate you. All right. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.